Hey everyone, welcome to Generative Now. I am Michael Mignano. I am a partner at Lightspeed. And this week, you're going to hear part 2 of my conversation with Matt Hartman. As a reminder, Matt is the founder and a partner at Factorial Capital, which is a new type of venture fund that focuses on partnering with angels and currently has a specific focus in AI. Matt and I pick up our conversation about AI and how it has fundamentally changed the way that the internet works. So check out this conversation with Matt Hartman. What else is catching your interest these days?
I've been thinking a lot about what are the B2B SaaS products that are AI native? If you imagine that the team you need to build that, if we take the industry out, the team you need is a researcher who can really build, models well, a business person who understands the industry for user acquisition and for understanding what the actual product needs to be, and then maybe, depending on the category or product person, probably in my guess, who can kind of figure out what that application looks like. The questions I've been asking myself are, just if you each category, kind of vertical by vertical, what's a good fit for where the value could accrue to a new company versus where it's probably going to accrue to an existing company, and then also, there's some interesting models where people are, it's almost like we're not investing in this stuff, but like private equity style. Do you need the distribution? Do you start a startup, or do you buy a company that is doing it an old way and kind of inject AI to change the cost structure? That sounds like literal to me, but I bet that there's a version of that's 20 degrees off. That's interesting.
It's a good point. Like I do wonder if it needs to be done in sort of a PE style way. Because I think if not, it would probably just be so hard to sort of organ transplant the culture and potentially do some business model destruction.
The way one person described it to me was, picture you spend money on customer acquisition, right?
Yeah.
What if the best way to acquire customers is to hire a company that has customers? And if the math works better like that, then the question is, can you integrate it? People are talking about service as software, where the thing that you present is the service, and don't worry about how we do it, and you can use AI to do it. I think there's a bunch of business model questions interesting, which takes me back to web GPU. Can you right now, where all of our assumptions are probably the cost of running inference comes down, but it's non-zero. But what if it is fully zero? What does that change? What kind of products could you build? What kind of here's a category that I'm kind of fascinated by. What kind of personalization happened? The best personalization. I also have been playing. I learned by just tinkering around with projects. So I've got this project where I took all the RSS feeds from New York local news. I pull them in, and then you can write a prompt that will give you a newsletter about just the topics you care about. But you control the prompt. It's actually it's not that expensive to run, but it's not zero because I have to.
That's really interesting to me.
Well, people can go to nysignal.com if they live in New York.
With most content platforms, even the ones that are purely sort of personalized and algorithmic, they're ultimately optimized around ad revenue. And so it's really just about maximizing your engagement. And your engagement is really attached to your revealed preferences, not what you think your preferences are. That's why we're addicted to TikTok. It's, it's junk food. It's not broccoli. But if you had a model and you had a product that let you you actively tune the personalization and go to work for you, you'd have to fund it a different way. You can't fund it through ads. It just would never work. If you funded it through ads, it would just revert to junk food.
The thought process I have is you kind of picture with Tinder, any of these things, you're training a model. It sits on their server. But imagine the model sits on your server and you're actually kind of controlling it. The problem with that is it's actually pretty expensive to run it that way.
But not if you had web GPU.
Is my high, an observation. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I wonder if that is one of the second order implications.
Well, hold on, just to pull on this a little bit. Why can't the model be on the server in this model? It still could be user funded. Are you saying it's just cost prohibitive?
There's two different questions. One is it could be on the server, right? That's what we're doing now. But it's running. It's now basically what we do is we score a bunch of articles through these RSS feeds our way. And then separately, we look at what your prompt is and score it against your specific prompt, which is a lot of iteration.
What's the prompt?
You can be I am interested in for me, mine says something like, I live in Brooklyn and I'm really interested in like economic policy and jobs generally and in transportation. Don't give me any news about Trump. That's like what mine says. Unless it's specifically related to New York City. And that tends to get, like, I don't want national politics news in this particular newsletter. That's not why I'm here. And it works. But I was talking to somebody else who's like, they're involved with like this canoeing thing on the waterfront. He's like, I really care about waterfront news. And like, that's an interesting prompt. Like, it never would have occurred to me to be like, give me all the news related to New York City waterfront legislation is kind of an interesting prompt because like no one's ever going to come up with that. But the problem is, so from a cost perspective, we got to run every article through his prompt. So if we have 100,000 users,
there's a real cost. Yeah.
Right. Then like that doesn't scale well. Unless either you have small models and run them, and then that's possible, right? Like the cost of running inference is coming down, but it's not zero. I don't know if there's a way to run that locally, you could make costs lower. And then what's kind of interesting is that people are willing to pay for these tokens because they know there's a cost to run them.
Yeah, totally. That's why you're willing to spend probably as much as you do on Suno.
Yeah, I'm like, I know you're not just like charging me. Otherwise, you're trying to make it as cheap as possible for me to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
As Suno. But I do often run local models to see how long it would take, because that's the trade-off often, especially running on your CPU, is just time. But there isn't like a music model I can even do that with, There's some video models, but the reason why I mention that is because technology isn't enough. The business model matters. And what are the things that are changing that could, like, social media inverted a business model, right? And tokens, I wonder, like, are they inverting a business model in some way? And if we can reduce that cost, like people are willing to pay for this stuff, is there something that will change that it can make the business model fundamentally different?
I wrote this blog post, The End of Advertising, clickbaity title. I'm probably exaggerating about it being the end of advertising. Basically the whole premise is like, look, we're moving toward more and more towards a future where like agents are going out and capturing the information we want to know and understand on our behalf, right? This is effectively what happens when you go to Perplexity, or even like ChatGPT when it goes out and browses the web. Like those things are going out and browsing the web and collecting the information and coming back to you and delivering you the exact one thing you want to know, right? Even Google's doing this now through AI summaries or answers or whatever it's called. That is fundamentally disruptive to the existing business model of advertising on the internet, which is the thing that makes the entire internet free, right? The reason the internet is free is because you go to Google search, you search for a thing. I just searched for New York Signal. I wanted to find your website. I'm served a bunch of blue links. A few of them are sponsored. I click on one of them. That thing has ads on it, right? Those ads end up funding the thing that I went to search for. Right? Like that's how the New York Times and even like the smallest, tiniest blogs get funded.
New York Times also subscriptions, but yeah.
Sure. You get
and games business that's massive.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden, if you have agents running around and not human eyeballs consuming these things, the incentives just pretty quickly go away unless you find a different way to incentivize the content creator. The solution that we're hoping, it's an investment we announced a few days ago. It's this thing called Tollbit. Which basically blocks AI scraping and makes the AI scrapers pay a toll before serving the content for RAG.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but you could just see, if we keep going down this path, which I think we will, the business model of the internet is going to change. And it's easy to be like, well, ads will get figured out. Like ads will be injected into Perplexity and Google AI summaries, and I don't think it's that simple, right? Like I agree
with you. I don't think like, if all of a sudden I had ads inside my Trello, that would be quite annoying, right? Like I'm not there. Like I'm there to get stuff done, not to give you my attention.
Correct.
And certainly I have to-do lists that would be great to advertise against, but I'm
sure it'll work to some extent. Perplexity will figure out ads. Google will figure out this new version of ads. ChatGPT will figure out this new version of ads, but like, we can't say the economics are going to be the same. You and I just talked for 20 minutes about the economics of inference, right? Like it's different than serving a web page. I don't think we're talking or thinking enough about how much we effectively get for free today. And when I say free, I really mean like our attention, and how much that is potentially at risk of going away as a result of AI.
So, that's interesting, because compounding with that is with AI is more content. So if your attention somebody made a comment to me, that paper came out, it was called Attention is All You Need. And they're like, that couldn't be more true. Attention, if the cost of coding goes to zero,
Yep.
and the cost of creating content goes to zero, then there is this, we think there's a lot of stuff on the internet now, to a lot of noise now. It's going to whatever fold, right? Like, if it 100 folds, now all of a sudden the value of someone's attention is that much higher because there's so much more noise. And I just wonder if there could be totally different ways to get people's attention, like community has been for a little bit now. Like, they're just like the current ways are just not going to be viable.
Well, I also just think the value of premium content goes up, right? When you increase the supply, assuming the supply finds some way to get monetized, the new supply, then the demand, I think, for like the premium stuff, the good stuff, is going to go up.
I suppose another way to think about it, though, like to take, again, the opposite argument just as a thought experiment is if we do things that are in kind of two buckets generally, which is probably not true, but like, let's say the two things we do are productivity and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of ironic because like a lot of our entertainment right now is not advertising. It's like, Netflix. I mean, I guess like people, there's not a lot of ads inside of, once you a lot of the entertainment
YouTube,
is now
Spotify,
certainly YouTube, right? Has ads. Spotify has ads, but there is still paid, stuff inside of entertainment. But if we think it's basically entertainment and productivity, search is probably the number one place for productivity, right? You go in there because you're trying to do something, even the thing you're trying to do. And discovery is probably someplace in the middle here because like sometimes it is productive to discover. But like having something on TikTok, probably not paying for TikTok. And I joke that Instagram is like a mall. It knows you, it's pretty good. And it has a lot of stuff that's like really targeted towards you. That probably doesn't change. But a lot of the productivity spaces in your agentic world, a lot of that user acquisition is sitting in the productivity category. And if those go down to zero, if there's no ads.
Well, it's probably everything that starts with a search, right?
Right.
It's probably everything that starts with a Google search. Which, by the way, while we're on this topic, I think these Google AI answers are like a really perfect glimpse of what's to come. Have you spent time with this yet? It's not called AI answers. I don't know what it's called.
I mean, when I go to Google, I ignore all of the links because they are all ads. The entire first page is sponsored content.
It's called AI overview. The first thing is the answer to my question.
Oh, yeah.
The links are very secondary. Why am I going to click on any of these links? I don't need to.
How about I look up?
What is aggregation theory? Ben Thompson. What is aggregation theory?
Okay.
Aggregation theory is a framework that describes how the internet has been disrupted and how platforms come to dominate. And then there's a whole thing that explains it.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you ever go to Stratechery? My point is, do you think Ben Thompson likes this?
Well, he has a subscription model, right?
Sure, but now you don't even have a reason to go. You're not even going to land on the website and subscribe.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, I hear you. I think that for that, if I want to learn something, I probably want to keep. I mean, we're at some point maybe I'm using Google search like chat, right? Like, okay, cool. Now tell me about an example. Okay, then it gives me an example, and it looks a lot like chat, which is potentially interesting. I mean, what I would love is like a video overview that allows me to ask follow-up questions and then generates, even more of a response. Totally possible, right?
For most people on the internet, maybe not the best of the best, because you're right, they probably have other ways to monetize this. But for most people on the internet, the two main incentives for why you would make anything, distribution and revenue, are effectively gone by this.
That could easily be true.
Yeah.
Your point is, what's the next thing? Is there another place where that discovery could happen?
It happens within a model probably. And not through a model because it wouldn't be trained on the real-time information, but it happens via RAG, right? And so these answer engines, they become the operating system eventually.
I do agree with that. I think my question is, how deep are they? Or do you end up like Facebook? You ended up first you did you would do posts that would try to get a bunch of likes to go viral, and then you could promote those posts, right? But the ad unit was native to the new platform, right? It wasn't just run AdSense. So the equivalent here would be I guess I'm thinking like, okay, my example is I now have this like YouTube channel and I kind of want to like see if I could get some subscribers. What's the best way to get subscribers? And probably the answer is use a lot of keywords in the description, but like, I don't know if that's the answer. So I would type that question in, it'll start to give it to me. And then the question is, what's below that is or isn't shared? Like, I want to go deep into that question. And right now there's probably like some paid YouTube channel that will like tell you how to get a bunch of users and how to monetize your YouTube channel. I would imagine. And it's like behind a paywall, or they're like, oh, they're like, buy my thing. Like somebody is on there telling you how to do this. Maybe they're good at it, maybe not, but they're like, buy my thing. And how different is that than providing just enough of an answer, like Ben Thompson's answer, to be like, buy my thing, so that when NVIDIA's stock price goes up, I'm going to use aggregation theory to like analyze why that's happened. There is a bunch of people who have created a social media native business model, which at the end of the day is freemium. They give you a little bit of stuff and then they charge you for the deeper stuff. And on the App Store, it's kind of turned out to be the same thing, right? Like Headspace, you can have today's meditation, but if you want like the whole library or a bunch of features, you have to buy it. Ben Thompson, I'll give you one article, or I'll give you the top half of the article and you can subscribe for the whole thing. The information does that. That's more media, but like also fitness instructors do that, right? They go onto social media and they show some of their exercises, but the hope is that you subscribe to their fitness thing. That didn't really exist pre-social. And if you think about SEO is like the Yelps of the world. We're saying, okay, we're going to make a bunch of landing pages. You're going to come on a landing page and eventually going to sign up and you're going to be part of this. And then we're going to be able to go charge. We're going to have a marketplace. I would imagine that the question I think you're asking is a good one, and is we just sort of assume there's going to be a native AI way to do this, and what if the answer is actually there isn't?
Yeah,
because
yeah, exactly. We just assume it's all going to work out, and it probably will to some extent, but it's not going to be the same. It's not just going to transfer over one to one. That I'm sure of.
I think it won't transfer over one to one. I think that the question that everyone's asking is, hang on a second, is OpenAI trained on all of the stuff that I put out for free because I had this other business model expectation? And it'll be this moment in time, like all the internet up till 2025 looked like X, and then people stopped publishing blog posts because they were not useful and they weren't getting monetized. To what degree is AI helpful if there's a fundamental disincentive to feed it stuff? And how much stuff do you really need? Like, do you need to be the 50th person to explain how to do in my example, like a workout or something? All
the more reason I think puts a premium on like the best content.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of see that how OpenAI does deals, right? They're like, they don't need an infinite amount of information.
They don't need the long tail.
If you're the first,
they don't
if
care.
You're the first one to give me the X thing I need, then like, I'll give you the money.
Then we're good. We're good. So I just think it's interesting. I just think it's really interesting.
Because of Facebook's business model, they have an incentive to like bring people the internet and at their own cost. Like that's how good their monetization is. And yes, there's a cost, but it's your attention, but also it's only your attention. And the amount of people who like couldn't pay to have Gmail or couldn't pay to access the internet or couldn't pay to connect to people, like that's it. Just get more people to the internet because they're like, it's amazing that everybody has this. I'll tell you the category. Can I switch gears for a second?
Yeah, of course.
A thing I've been thinking a lot about is if the cost of coding something goes to zero, and if you can build a niche product with one person who is really close to the problem, probably that person isn't officially a product manager. They're basically functioning like a product manager because they can make the design really easy over here and they can write the code over here. The question I've been asking myself is like, I'll use Gmail as an example. Like we all use one of like 3 email apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that because there's one best email? There's basically one best product for everybody? Or is there simply like, is the business model of your attention such that the cost of creating a new email app so high that this is kind of what we're ended up with. And actually, you could have, and the email is like a bad example of this.
Yeah, this is
but
interesting.
Like, what's the niche version of everything? And like,
I know what you're saying. You're saying there are incumbent products and companies for which it's probably too expensive for a startup or an individual or even another company to attempt to compete. Because to build something like that's 10x better for the general population, or even just for yourself, the chances of it working or being that much better are so slim that it's not even worth it to compete.
Or there's not even that much. Yeah, and there's maybe not many people times the amount of dollars that they would pay.
But if the cost of software is effectively free,
if the cost of building it is effectively free,
building software is free, then you can have, not only can you have these really like personalized experiences like on demand, but you could also have sort of the best version of software for any use case on the internet.
I did this with my piano bar app, right? So I played a piano bar, and I always test software like to take piano requests. So I used Bubble, the no-code app, and in 8 hours, that's probably generous, it's probably shorter than that, I built basically Trello for me and a QR code for the person who's at the piano bar where they can scan it, enter a song, it comes into my like inbox, I can tap it, it goes to the main thing, I tap it and go to archive, I've already played it. Then like I add on like, okay, here's my Venmo, or like, oh, wait a second, I can integrate it with Stripe, and now I can actually see the tip on the Trello card effectively, right? So now I'm taking tips. That's pretty unique to a piano player. I actually want a button that will, just a quick button to get to the lyrics or the chords. Just like just a quick short button. Like Trello isn't building this, right? And the only reason, so now I've got like 100 piano players using it. They're generating like a decent amount of tips.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I've done zero marketing. I only
What's it called? We got to link to it.
It's called My Request Room. My
Request Room. Is that the URL?
Yeah.
MyRequestRoom.com. Here it is.
Yeah. So it's super
You built this
simple.
in 8 hours.
I built this with Bubble. I mean, I've added on features to it over time.
Yeah.
The truth is, because I code, I could get like, you run into these things where you're like, and I charge people for it. It's like generates revenue. Piano players pay for it, piano bars pay for it. And the pitch to them is like, you can probably get more tips, but also you can collect, like, people can opt into like, take my email. I could grow your email list. And you have, so there's like, I like this example because there's a very small dollar budget for like piano players. Like they're not spending a lot of money on software.
No startup would ever invest in this.
Right? Like no venture.
They would never invest their time in this. There's no big business here.
Right. But if you're really close to the problem, and so you know exactly what you need as a user, and you have some distribution because you're in the community of piano players or piano bars, and then you can use, in my case, no code. No code was like, Bubble was a really good product. I think actually you end up still needing to understand a little bit of code. You end up running into walls. But then what happens when you actually don't? Right now, what if I can ask it? Imagine this was genuine code, and I could say, "Hey, I want a button here that does this." Okay,
you might be able to do that today. Literally,
exactly.
I think in ChatGPT, you could probably build My Request Room today.
I now don't code anymore. I just copy paste things into ChatGPT, and now I've found that like using Replit, which has basically got like the chat incorporated into it. There's a company called Polymet that lets you do build React interfaces, where you can like take a picture of a drawing and say what you want it to do, and then you can hover over it. Like we invest in this company. You can hover over this button and be like, oh wait, no, when I hover over this one, when you click on it, you can say with your language, when I hover over this button, I want it to turn blue.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even have to know how to code React. And now I just have to like meld that into, the back end. And all of a sudden, without being able to code, you have to kind of be able to think, like have systems thinking, and you have to be able to not build product. Like the extreme version of this is like, imagine every user request was actually like every time somebody requested a feature, imagine that like the AI just did a pull request, right? I could actually end up with a terrible product because you just have this Frankenstein thing, but that, I think that spirit is kind of interesting.
Is this like the moment for product managers? Like it almost felt like there was a moment where like product managers were going to go extinct, because it just seemed like, engineers got really good at design and at like taste. And, in terms of cost cutting, it was like, why would you hire a PM? It's sort of like this middle unnecessary layer. Does AI actually make it go back in the other direction, where if you're a PM or a non-technical founder, it's just like, boom, I could just make stuff now?
I actually think I agree with that in two places. In the non-venture backed stuff, the person who matters, like what a true, I mean, product manager means something different in different companies. The person who can translate a user need, and the person who can say you're not asking for a faster horse is the person who can use all of this software to build a new thing, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a product manager. I think at companies too, though, going from the OpenAI playground to answering the question, what is the best way for people to engage with this API we've built? The answer, it took 3 years to figure out that answer was ChatGPT. Like, that was an invention. I know that it seems really simple and it seems dumb, but like, if it was that obvious, they would have done it at the beginning. Yeah. It was experimentation around what do users want? How do we help people engage with this thing? And I think I think that will look like the equivalent of like what MS-DOS looked like to having Windows is like ChatGPT will look like MS-DOS. And we are all trying to figure out what Windows looks like. I think that the product manager, the true product manager, is needed both at these small, companies, but also at these big companies. They're not meaning products that are genuine AI research that still need to have a user interface invented. Prompt engineering is sort of like a way to communicate with these models. I personally don't think that that's the be all end all of how we're going to communicate with them.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn, I won't name the product or the company, but an AI product that is very, very beloved and growing very, very quickly right now, like 90% of the magic is prompt engineering. It's just like all prompting. Like, it's just, there's a couple people in the company, all they do all day is they prompt.
I'm going to ask you as a VC, do you look at that and say, A, I don't care how they do it as long as the product they make is great? Do you look at that and say, B, if you're deciding, I think about like this spectrum of prompt engineering to fine tuning as basically this trade-off of where the customizing is happening. Fine tuning sounds better to me. Like, it sounds more investable. But like, for you as a VC, do you care if the product is working? Do you worry that prompt engineering isn't defensible? Do you worry that, or are you like, I don't care as long as it's good?
I don't care if there are other defensible aspects, right? Like, if there are network effects, or if there's some data moat that gets created, or like, I don't care if it's like, I feel like this term, like, wrapper, like GPT wrapper, has become like a dirty word. And like, haven't we always just been building wrappers on top of technology and like finding ways to make the brands really defensible, or get network effects, or whatever, like make the lock-in, whatever. We've always had to find ways to make products defensible. I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, I think so I agree with you on I think that the wrapper thing is I do think there are products which are only wrappers. They don't have their own defensibility. I think that is
yeah, sure.
But the reason why we call them wrappers is because they don't have defensibility, not because, like, the wrappers is sort of incidental. I kind of think about Twilio, right? Like, GroupMe was kind of a Twilio wrapper, right? It's all like Twilio existed, and so they built
but it
a
had
group
like
text
crazy network effects, right?
Exactly.
Because once you brought a bunch of users on, you had a graph, and it
was a really good product. Built on
product,
right?
Yeah, totally.
And over time, it was very obvious that it should also be an app, right? And like, there's a whole bunch of reasons. But then you look at, okay, what are the other things that are text-based? Are they just wrappers on Twilio? All the way to the extreme of like, okay, so if I'm getting a text update from CVS, I'm certainly not, no one would argue that CVS is a wrapper on top of Twilio, right? Maybe it's platform risk is like another way to articulate it.
Platform risk. I think that's a great way to, wrapper as a derogatory term is really just another way of saying there's platform risk.
Right. And that's totally legitimate. Sometimes there's platform risk.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes there's not. But you have to discount an entire category of thing because they use an open API seems quite naive to me.
Matt, always a pleasure. Love talking to you. Thanks for coming on. We got to do it again sometime.
Thanks so much for having me on, Mike.
Thanks for listening to Generative Now. If you liked what you heard, please rate and review the podcast. That really does help. And please subscribe if you want to be notified next time we release new episodes. If you want to learn more about the podcast, follow Lightspeed at LightspeedVP on YouTube, X, or LinkedIn. Generative Now is produced by Lightspeed in partnership with Pod People. I am Michael Mignano, and we will be back next week. See you then.